The wax had been pressed hard, the lion stamped so deep it looked bruised. Cersei read the words once, then again, as if she could scald them back into sense by staring. Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, Shield of Lannisport, Warden of the West, dead. The room did not change. The torches did not gutter. The painted table did not crack. Yet something in the air shifted, a fine and invisible structure collapsing without sound. She heard her own breath, short and sharp, as if someone had struck her in the ribs. "No," she said softly, and hated the way it sounded like a prayer. Pycelle's chain clinked as he leaned closer, peering at the raven scroll with watery eyes. "Your grace is there. Do not touch it." Cersei's fingers tightened until the parchment creased. She forced her hand to relax, slowly, as if she were teaching a wild thing not to bolt. "Say nothing." Varys was very still, all soft silk and careful flesh. His smile did not form, but his eyes brightened with a hungry attentiveness that made her want to slap him. "A grievous loss," he murmured, as if announcing rain. Cersei did not look at him. If she looked at him, she might show him too much. The words on the parchment spoke of a fever taken on the road, of chills that seized Tywin in the saddle, of his teeth clenching so hard his jaw cramped. They spoke of a night in a keep that was not theirs, a lord who could not be commanded by gold or fear. They spoke of the maester's potions failing, of Tywin Lannister's eyes remaining open long after breath had fled. Even dead, father kept his eyes open, as if to see who would move first. "Who else knows?" she asked, and found her voice had become a blade again. Pycelle glanced down, then up, then down. "Only those who sent it, your grace. The Ravencoat's keeper. My own man." "My men," Cersei corrected, and watched Pycelle flinch. Varys drifted nearer, like perfume wafting. "Ravens rarely fly alone, sweet queen. The road is talkative. A death, especially such a death, leaves footprints in every tongue it steps upon." Cersei folded the parchment with precise care. She could feel her pulse in her throat. She imagined the court, 1,000 eager mouths swallowing the news and chewing it into different shapes. Tywin murdered, Tywin toppled, Tywin cursed. She imagined lords who had bent the knee to the lion out of terror lifting their heads and discovering the sky was still there, vast and free. She imagined Robert, drunk and roaring, slapping her shoulder and bellowing, "Your father's gone? Gods, woman, now you'll have to learn to smile." She imagined Ned Stark's stern gray eyes, and for an instant her mind tried to turn Tywin's death into another piece on the board. Something she could leverage, something she could push. But the board had been Tywin's. He had drawn it. He had taught her to see it. Now it was a table with blood on it, and she was alone. "Send for Ser Boros Blunt," she said, "and for Ser Meryn Trant, quietly. Want men at every door between here and the king's chambers." Pycelle blinked. "The king is hunting. I know where the king is." She knew where Robert was because she had put him there. She knew he would drink because she had poured the wine. She knew he would chase boar because he always needed something to chase. "Do as I say." Varys's fingers touched his own cheek, lightly, as if thinking, such precautions might be noticed. "Then let them notice," Cersei snapped. "Let them see a queen who expects storms." Her mind ran ahead, frantic and disciplined at once, like a horse trained to gallop even while it panicked. If father was dead, the Westerlands would look to Casterly Rock. To whom? Kevan, Jenna, the Bannermen, Jaime if Jaime were free. Jaime was in King's Landing, wrapped in white and vows, his hands still strong enough to kill a man and still soft enough to hold her when no one was watching. Jaime. She needed Jaime near, and she needed him obedient. She needed Tyrion, too, though the thought soured her mouth. Tyrion had father's mind, the same cold weight behind the eyes. She had always hated that it lived in a twisted little body like a jest. And she needed Robert dead, sooner now, because as long as Robert lived, she was only a queen by marriage, a lioness in another man's den. Tywin's death had torn the leash off every dog in the realm. Cersei stood. The chair scraped on stone. Pycelle reached for her, not touching, only hovering. "Your grace, grief. Grief is for after," she said and pushed past him. As she stepped into the corridor, the red keep felt different beneath her feet. The walls had always been thick, ancient, heavy with secrets. Tonight they seemed thinner, as if a strong hand had stopped pressing them into shape. Somewhere above, a raven croaked, harsh and knowing. Jaime read the parchment faster than she had, eyes flicking and narrowing, a soldier's mind stripping the words down to what mattered. When he reached the end, he did not sag. He did not swear. He folded it once, neatly, as if it were a battlefield report. "He's dead," he said, as though naming a sword. Cersei watched his mouth form the words. Part of her wanted Jaime to break, to shout, to shake, to throw the scroll into the fire and rage until the walls trembled. Another part of her needed him steady. She needed him to be what father had been, an iron presence that could fill a room and silence it. Jaime did not fill the room. He filled her. "He cannot be dead," Cersei said, and hated that she sounded like a girl again, like the girl who had stood in Casterly Rock's shadow believing the world would never shift beneath it. Jaime's green eyes held hers. "Mendi." Not him. Jaime's gaze dropped for the first time. Even him. Silence swelled between them. The fire popped. Outside, a servant's footsteps paused, then retreated, as if the castle itself feared intruding. Cersei stepped closer and took Jaime's wrists. She felt the cords of his strength beneath skin, the warmth, the life. "You will not leave me," she said. It was command and plea braided together. Jaime's fingers tightened around hers. "I'm here. You are Kingsguard," she whispered, the word tasting like bile. "You are bound to him." "Bound to a crown," Jaime said. His voice softened. "And to you." It was almost enough. Almost. Cersei drew his hands up and pressed her forehead to his knuckles. She did not let herself cry. Tears were a weakness father had always despised, and now father's eyes were open somewhere cold, watching. "We must move," she said. "If this spreads before we decide how it is told." "It will spread," Jaime said. "Ravens don't carry secrets. Men do." Cersei lifted her head. "Then we will make men afraid of repeating it." Jaime's mouth twitched. "That's father talking. Father is gone," she said, sharp, and the words stung as if they were thorns. She held Jaime's gaze. "I will be father now." Jaime studied her as if seeing a wound she had not acknowledged. "You can't be him." Cersei released his hands and crossed to the window. Below, the courtyards of the Red Keep lay in torchlight, ants moving along stone paths, soldiers, servants, shadows. King's Landing beyond was a black sea of roofs and smoke, restless even in sleep. "You will not tell anyone," Cersei said. "Not even your brothers." "I have one brother here," Jaime replied, "and he will smell it the moment he looks at your face." "Then I will not let him look at my face," she said. "Tyrion is not here. Not yet. I will send for him when I choose." Jaime leaned against the table, the white cloak like spilled milk over the chair. "If father's dead, Kevan will ride. The West will want answers. Casterly Rock will want a lord. The Rock will have a lion," Cersei said. "My son is a lion." Jaime's eyes sharpened. "Your son is a boy. A king," Cersei corrected. "And I am his mother." Jaime said nothing. His silence was not judgment, but it felt like one. Cersei's mind returned, as it always did, to Robert, to the hunt, to the boar's tusks, to Lancel pouring wine like a dutiful idiot. Robert would come back bleeding or drunk or both, laughing as if death were a joke told for his amusement. And now she felt time pressing at her like a hand at the back of her neck. "Tomorrow," she said, "I will speak with the council. Not tonight. Tonight we prepare. I want the city watch doubled at the gates. I want the Red Keep sealed."
"Ivant niet stark vochet."
Jaime's brows drew together. "Stark? Why?" "Because father is dead," Cersei said, turning, and her voice was a whip. "And the wolves will smell it." Jaime pushed off the table and came to her. He touched her cheek, gentle and steady. "Cersei." She leaned into his hand before she could stop herself. For a heartbeat, she was only a woman, not a queen, not a mother, not an heir to a dead lion. She was only the girl who had sat beside him in the dark and promised they would never be separated. Then the castle creaked and the world returned. "Swear it," she said. "Swear you will not leave me." Jaime's thumb brushed her skin. "I swear." Cersei closed her eyes and believed him because she needed to. Robert came home as she had expected. Roaring even while he bled, the sound ragged at the edges. The boar had opened him from belly to hip, and the stink of blood filled the hall, metallic and thick. Men stumbled under his weight, their boots slicking on stone. Cersei stood at the foot of the dais, hands folded lightly in front of her, the picture of a grieving wife. Her heart did not pound. Her breath did not catch. She watched Robert like one watches a dying fire, fascinated by how much heat had once lived there, now dwindling to embers. His eyes found hers, bleary and furious. "Woman," he rasped. "You!" She stepped closer, letting the torchlight paint her cheekbones and the lines at the corners of her eyes. "My love," she said, and the lie came so easily it might have been truth. Ned Stark's gaze was on her like a blade held to the throat. He stood stiff as winter, his honor a heavy cloak that never came off. Cersei met his eyes briefly, long enough to let him know she saw him, long enough to let him know she was not afraid. Renly hovered near the back, face taut. He looked at Robert's blood, then at Cersei, and some thought flickered in his eyes: ambition, fear, calculation. He would move if he sensed weakness. They all would. Barristan Selmy's jaw worked. The old knight did not like seeing kings bleed. It offended his belief that duty could make things clean. Robert's hands clawed at the air as if grabbing for an ale horn. Lancel knelt near him, pale as milk, eyes darting to Cersei and away again. Cersei's mouth softened into something that could pass for pity. They carried Robert through the corridors, a dripping procession. Cersei walked beside the stretcher, her skirt brushing stone, her head high. She could feel the castle watching through its cracks and shadows. She could feel Varys somewhere nearby, invisible but present, like rot behind a tapestry. In the king's chambers, Robert was laid on the bed, sweat and blood shining on him. He was enormous even dying, a bear dragged down at last. His breath came in wet gasps. Pycelle scuttled forward with potions and cloths. "Your grace, we must." Robert slapped weakly at him. "Out," he snarled. "Out, all of you. Leave me with my wife and Lord Stark." Cersei's eyes flicked to Ned. Robert wanted Ned's witness. Robert wanted his precious honor to seal his last words. Renly's mouth tightened. He opened it, then closed it as if swallowing a protest. Jaime stood near the door, helmet under his arm. The king's guard a wall of white silence. His eyes found Cersei's for a heartbeat, steadying. One by one they left until only 3 remained: the dying king, the wolf, and the lioness. Robert's gaze slid to Ned. "Stark," he rasped. You'll hold the kingdom together. You hear me? You'll." Ned moved closer, hands at his sides, as if afraid to touch. "Rest, your grace." Robert's eyes rolled to Cersei again, and for a moment something like regret passed over his face. Not for her, a foe, or himself, for what he had been. You and I," he whispered. "We never." Cersei leaned down so her hair fell like gold over his pillow. "Hush," she said gently. "Save your strength." Robert's cracked lips twitched. "Strength," he breathed, tasting the word like a memory. His eyes glazed, then sharpened suddenly with a flash of anger. "Where's my son?" Cersei's smile did not falter. "He will come," she said, "when you are ready." Robert's fingers clenched at the sheets. "My son," he said again, as if trying to summon the shape of the boy in his mind and finding only fog. "Stock, paper, Ned produced it. The will, the scrawl of Robert's last command. Cersei watched Ned's hand as he held it out, watched Robert's trembling fingers drag the quill, watched the ink spill like blood. Regent until my son comes of age. She wondered, idly, whether father's eyes were open somewhere, watching her claim the kingdom without him. When it was done, Robert sagged back. The rage drained from him, leaving only exhaustion.
Ned spoke softly.
Your grace, I will see your will carried out. Robert's gaze fixed on him. Promise. I promise. Cersei almost laughed. Promises were for children. Men ruled with steel, with gold, with fear. Robert's breath shuddered. He turned his head slightly, as if seeking one last sight of the world. Lyanna, he whispered, and then his eyes slipped half-closed, chasing a ghost he had loved more than any living woman. Cersei straightened. Lord Stark, she said, voice smooth. You have heard the king. Ned's eyes did not leave Robert. I have, and you will honor him, Cersei said, and the words held a warning beneath them like a dagger in a sleeve. Ned finally looked at her. I will honor the realm. Cersei's smile turned sharp. Then we understand each other. Outside, the castle's heartbeat continued. Guards shifting, doors creaking, distant murmurs. Somewhere, ravens waited with black wings folded. Father was dead, Robert was dying, and the kingdom, like a frightened horse, was about to bolt. King's Landing mourned before it knew what it mourned. That was Cersei's doing. She filled the streets with black cloth and gold lions, with whispered orders and hired wails, with solemn-faced guards posted at every square. Let the city see grief, she thought. Grief looked like control when properly arranged. She went to the Great September not to pray but to be seen. The candles made her skin look softer, her hair more saintly, the green of her gown darker and more modest. The September's air was thick with incense and old stone, and the seven stared down with painted serenity. Sansa Stark was there, a small red-headed bird with her eyes swollen from crying. The girl clutched a seven-pointed star so tightly her knuckles blanched. She did not look at Cersei, but she could not avoid her either. Fear made a person feel the presence of danger even when they did not dare turn. Cersei drank from a silver cup, sweet wine watered to a ceremonial sip, and felt nothing. The gods were wooden and silent. The only god that had ever answered her had been Father, and Father answered with punishment. Now Father was silent. After the Septons murmured blessings, Cersei drifted through the aisles as the other mourners dispersed, their whispers like wind through dead leaves. She paused near Sansa, tilting her head as if in sympathy. My sweet child, Cersei said softly. You look as though your heart will crack. Sansa's eyes lifted at last, shining. Your grace, she whispered, and bent her head lower. Cersei studied her. There was strength in the girl's stubborn sorrow, a northern steel wrapped in silk. Sansa had been raised on songs that promised noble endings. King's Landing had already begun teaching her what songs hid. Do you know what frightens men most? Cersei asked. Sansa swallowed. Dragons? She tried, voice small. Cersei's mouth curved. No, not dragons. Dragons are obvious. Men can see them coming and die brave. What frightens men most is uncertainty. The thought that the world might change shape overnight, and that nothing they rely upon will hold. Sansa stared, confused. She was too young to understand that Cersei was not speaking about gods or grief. She was speaking about power. My father says, Sansa began, then stopped herself, as if remembering her father was now on a blade's edge. Cersei watched her flinch at the thought. Good. Fear made people pliable. Your father is an honorable man, Cersei said. The words were almost true. Honor was a kind of madness, but it was still a kind. And honorable men often mistake the rules of war for the rules of court. Sansa's lips trembled. He's the king's friend. The king is dead, Cersei said plainly, and watched the sentence land like a stone dropped into a pond. Ripples of grief, of shock, of fresh terror. Sansa's breath hitched. Then Joffrey is king, Cersei finished. And I am his mother. You will remember that. Sansa nodded quickly, desperate. Cersei leaned in, her voice still. "Kay. If you are wise, you will be a good girl and love my son. Love makes chains far stronger than iron." Sansa's eyes squeezed shut as if she were trying to force love into being. She was a child trapped in a lion's den, trying to sing her way out. Cersei straightened and turned away, her mind already moving. Love made chains. Fear made them tighter. As she left the Sept, she saw Varys lingering near a pillar, hands folded, his face a mask of pious solemnity. Their eyes met. His were full of questions he would never ask aloud. He bowed. "Your grace is most devoted." "Devotion is a weapon," Cersei said, and swept past him. In the courtyard, the wind off Blackwater Bay carried the smell of salt and smoke. Ravens shifted in their cages, restless. The city's bells tolled, slow and heavy, as if each note were another nail in a coffin. Somewhere in the Red Keep, Robert Baratheon exhaled his last. And Cersei Lannister, widow and queen mother, did not shed a tear. The Godswood in the Red Keep was a quiet mockery of the north. Its trees were older than the castle around them, their roots drinking from a pool that had seen more secrets than the throne. The heart tree's face stared with carved sorrow, red leaves drifting like blood on pale bark. Ned Stark waited beneath it, the parchment in his hand. He looked as if he had not slept. His honor sat on his shoulders like armor, heavy and unyielding. Cersei approached with measured steps, her cloak brushing grass wet with morning dew. She did not bring guards into the Godswood. She did not need them. The Godswood was not a sanctuary. It was a stage. "Lord Stark," she said, inclining her head. "Queen Regent," Ned replied, stiff. Cersei's mouth tightened at the title, not from offense but from recognition. Regent, a word that sounded like a hand on a child's shoulder, steadying him until he could stand alone, until he pushed you away. Ned held out Robert's will. "The king named me protector of the realm until his son comes of age." Cersei did not take the parchment. She let it hang between them like a baited hook. "My son is of age to be king," she said. Ned's jaw worked. "He is 12. He is crowned," Cersei answered. "The realm will not be ruled by committees and parchment. It will be ruled by a king." "And by his mother," Ned said, his voice sharp with restrained anger. Cersei's smile was cold. "Naturally." Ned's eyes hardened. "I know the truth of Joffrey's birth." For a heartbeat the gods would seem to still. Even the leaves paused, as if listening. Cersei felt something in her chest tighten. An old fear, a familiar one. She had anticipated this. She had always known it might come. Yet hearing it spoken aloud, here beneath gods that did not belong to her, made it feel sharper. "The truth," she echoed softly. "And what truth is that, Lord Stark?" Ned's voice was low. "He is not Robert's son." Cersei studied Ned as if weighing him. Honor, duty, foolishness. There was a kind of courage in telling a lioness her cub was a bastard while standing alone. There was also stupidity. "I wonder," Cersei said, "if you feel brave in this moment." Ned's grip tightened on the parchment. "I feel responsible," Cersei finished for him. "Honorable, righteous. You have always been such a man." Her gaze sharpened. "And that is why you are here, speaking to me instead of acting." Ned's eyes narrowed. "I offered you a chance to flee." Cersei almost laughed. "Flee?" she repeated, and the word tasted ridiculous. "Do you think I am some frightened girl who will run when a man frowns at her? This is my home, Lord Stark. This is my city. My son is king." Ned's expression did not change. "He will not sit the throne. Not if I can prevent it." Cersei's gaze flicked to the heart tree's carved face. "If," she said, "always if, with honorable men. If the realm listens. If the gods favor you. If the city watch follows you." She stepped closer, her voice lowering. "Do you know what you lack, Lord Stark?" Ned's lips pressed into a thin line. "Tell me." Cersei's eyes glittered. "You lack my father." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ned blinked, a small crack in his control. "Tywin Lannister is dead," Cersei said, and watched the surprise flicker in Ned's eyes before he buried it. The wolf had not known. The wolf had thought the lion still had its old claws. Cersei felt the power of telling him. Power in seeing him recalibrate, silently, weighing what it meant. She tasted it like wine. "And yet," Cersei continued, "you still lack him. You lack the part of the world that understands what must be done when you want to win." Ned's expression did not change. "I do what is right, and I do what is necessary," Cersei said. Ned's hand tightened on the parchment again. "I will convene the council." Cersei's smile sharpened. "You may convene whoever you like. When you stand in that chamber, you will find that the realm belongs to those who have already moved." Ned stared at her, and she saw the moment he realized that his offer of mercy had been a mistake. Mercy was a gift you gave from strength. It was not something you offered to a lioness while your own throat was bare. "You should have taken Renly's offer," Cersei said softly, and saw Ned's eyes flicker. He had been approached. Of course he had. "You should have seized my children and called it justice. You should have done violence and called it duty. But you could not." Ned's voice was rough. "Leave my daughters out of this." Cersei's expression did not change. "Your daughters are in my house." Ned's nostrils flared. The wolf's temper, buried beneath snow, stirred. Cersei stepped back, letting the distance return like a curtain falling. "We are finished," she said. "Go back to your honor, Lord Stark. See if it will protect you." She turned and walked away beneath the red leaves, feeling Ned's gaze on her back like an arrow. Behind her, the heart tree wept red sap, and the gods remained silent. The throne room became a storm in a heartbeat. Ned Stark stood before the Iron Throne holding Robert's will as if it were a shield. He spoke of law, of duty, of the king's last command. The lords and courtiers watched, mouths tight, eyes darting as if searching for where the wind would blow. Joffrey sat in the throne that was too big for him, his thin shoulders swallowed by black and gold. He looked bored, then irritated, then gleeful, as if this were a mummer's show designed to amuse him. Cersei stood beside him, her hand light on the armrest, a mother steadying a child. Her face was calm, her stomach was not. Every breath felt like walking a narrow bridge over fire. Ned's voice rang through the chamber. "I was named Protector of the Realm." "Protector," Joffrey echoed, sneering. "You? You're a traitor." Ned's eyes flashed, controlled. "I have the king's seal." Cersei watched as he held the parchment out to the council like an offering, like a prayer. She watched as men who had once nodded at Tywin Lannister now hesitated, feeling the absence behind her like a missing wall. Littlefinger stepped forward, his smile a thin blade. "Lord Stark," he murmured, "I did warn you not to trust me." Then the gold cloaks surged. They poured from the doors and the galleries, a flood of brass and leather. Their captain, Janos Slint, barked orders like a butcher calling for knives. Hands grabbed Ned's arms. Ned fought briefly, instinctively, then stilled as if realizing that even wolves could not bite through a net. Sansa screamed. The sound cut like glass. She rushed forward, then a guard caught her, holding her back, her fingers clawing the air as if she could pull her father free through sheer love. Arya was not there. Cersei's mind noted it sharply, like a thorn. The younger wolf cub had vanished. Dangerous, unpredictable. Jaime's hand moved toward his sword, a reflex. Cersei's gaze snapped to him hard. "Not now, not here." Jaime's fingers loosened, slowly, like a man forcing himself not to breathe. Ned's gray eyes swung to Cersei. "This is treason," he said, voice low, meant for her. Cersei stepped forward, close enough that only he could hear. "So is defying your king," she whispered. Ned's jaw clenched. "He is not." Cersei's smile sharpened. "Say it loudly," she breathed. Say it for the realm. Say it and watch your daughters die for your courage." Ned's eyes flicked to Sansa, held in a guard's grip, her face twisted with terror. The wolf's pride faltered. He swallowed words that would have been noble, and in that swallow Cersei tasted victory. The gold cloaks dragged Ned away. His boots scraped stone. He did not struggle. He did not beg. He only held his head high, a man walking into darkness with his spine unbent. Joffrey leaned forward, eyes bright. "Take his head," he said suddenly, delighted by the idea as if it were a game. Cersei's heart lurched. Not yet. Not like this. She needed Ned alive for leverage, for bargaining, for North's compliance. She needed time. She leaned toward Joffrey, voice soft and firm. "Not now," she murmured. "We must be wise." Joffrey's lips twisted. "Wise?" he spat. "Like you." Cersei felt heat bloom behind her eyes. She forced it down. She smiled. "Like your grandfather would have been," she said, and watched Joffrey pause at the mention. The court's whispers shifted. The absence of Tywin's name made it heavier. Joffrey's expression soured, then smoothed into a cruel mimicry of restraint. "Fine," he snapped. "Put him in the black cells. Let him rot." Cersei exhaled slowly, as if she had just stepped back from a cliff edge. As the doors slammed behind Ned, the throne room felt hollow, echoing with the knowledge that the realm had just chosen its side. And Cersei Lannister stood beside her son, smiling like a queen, while inside her the lioness listened for the first tremors of war. The small council chamber smelled of wax and old wood, and tonight it smelled of something else beneath it. Fear sharp as vinegar. Cersei sat at the head of the table, Robert's seat, her spine straight. Joffrey had been sent away with his hounds and his boredom, because a boy king made poor decisions when he was excited, and Cersei could not afford excitement now. Pycelle trembled as he poured wine no one drank. Janos Slynt stood near the door, his gold cloak stiff, his eyes greedy and uncertain. Littlefinger lounged with the ease of a man who had just sold a soul and was counting the coins. Varys sat softly, smiling as though everything were a pleasant inconvenience. "We will speak plainly," Cersei said. "Lord Eddard Stark is imprisoned for treason. His household is under watch. His daughter Sansa Stark will remain in the Red Keep as guest and hostage." Pycelle dabbed at his mouth. "The North. The North will do what it is told," Cersei said, and heard the hollowness of the confidence even as she spoke it. The North had loved Eddard Stark. Love could be as dangerous as hate. Varys's hands folded neatly. "News travels quickly," he murmured, "especially news that rides on fear." Littlefinger's eyes glinted. "Fear is a fine horse, your grace. It goes where you point it." Cersei's gaze fixed on him. "And what of loyalty, Lord Baelish? Does it ride as well?" Littlefinger's smile widened slightly. "Loyalty is expensive. Fear is cheaper." Cersei's fingers tapped the table near the map. In her mind she saw the Westerlands, Tywin's banners, his disciplined marching. She saw them now without him, lions without a whip. She saw Kevan trying to hold them together, reasonable and slow. She saw bannermen weighing their own advantage. She needed a name to fill the void Tywin had left. She needed the world to believe the lion still had a patriarch, even if it was a lie. She could not be that patriarch in the eyes of men. Men would not admit it. They would call her mother, widow, whore, which anything but lord, unless they were made to. "Send ravens to the Westerlands," she said, "to every lord who ever swore to Casterly Rock. Tell them their duty is to the crown. Tell them the king calls on them to defend his realm against traitors." Pycelle fumbled with his chain. "To whom shall the ravens be addressed?" "Lord Ty. Lord Kevan," Cersei said, and tasted bitterness. Kevan was loyal, yes, but he was Tywin's shadow, not his equal. Shadows did not frighten wolves. Varys's eyes softened. "And what of your brother Tyrion?" Cersei's jaw tightened. "He is in the Vale," she said, and the words tasted of humiliation. Catelyn Stark had seized him like a thief, dragged him into the mountains like prey. Tywin would have burned the riverlands to ash for such an insult. Tywin was gone. The insult remained. Littlefinger's eyes gleamed with innocent interest. "A pity," he said. "A Lannister taken by a Stark. Such tales inspire boldness." Cersei's gaze snapped. To him, "Do you have news?" Littlefinger spread his hands. "Only whispers. The Eyrie is a cold place. Ravens do not like flying there." Cersei's mind raced. If Tyrion died in the Vale, the Westerlands would howl. If Tyrion lived, he might return with a grudge sharp enough to cut her. Yet Tyrion's mind was useful. Tyrion's cruelty could be aimed. If father had taught her anything, it was that weapons were not to be discarded because they were unpleasant to hold. "I want Tyrion back," Cersei said. "Alive." Varys inclined his head. "As you wish." Janos Slint cleared his throat, loud in the tense room. "Your Grace, the city watch is yours. But men talk. Men wonder why. Men wonder because they are allowed to wonder." Cersei cut in. She stood, letting her presence rise like heat. "You were paid, Janos. You were promoted. You were given gifts you did not deserve. If your men speak too loudly, remind them that I can take as easily as I give." Janos's face flushed. He bowed awkwardly. "Yes, Your Grace." Cersei walked to the window. King's Landing spread below like a wounded beast. Smoke curling from chimneys, torchlight flickering along streets. Somewhere in those streets, starving men would soon hear that the Hand was imprisoned, that the old lion was dead, that the crown was held by a boy and a woman. They would smell weakness. They would come with knives in the dark. Behind her, Varys's voice was soft. "The realm may accept much, Your Grace, but it has a tender stomach for uncertainty." Cersei turned. "Then we will feed it certainty," she said, "even if we have to choke it." Littlefinger's smile sharpened. Spoken like a true ruler. Cersei's eyes narrowed. Compliments were daggers in his mouth. She returned to the table, took a quill, and began signing orders. Seals pressed into wax like wounds. Arrest lists, bribes, threats, gifts to the faith, coin to the gold cloaks, ravens to the west. All the while, beneath the scratch of quill on parchment, she heard father's absence like a silence in a song, and she understood with a clarity that made her teeth ache, that she was no longer playing at power. She was holding it in her hands, and it was heavy, and it would cut her if she let it slip. The black cells smelled of piss and despair. The air was damp enough to cling to skin. Torches burned low, their smoke turning the ceiling into a sooty bruise. Somewhere deeper in the darkness, a man sobbed quietly, the sound thin and broken. Cersei descended the steps without hesitation. She did not let the stench show on her face. Queens did not flinch at filth. Queens commanded it. The guard at her side carried a ring of keys that clinked softly, a small music of power. When they reached Ned Stark's cell, the guard held the torch higher. Ned sat on straw that looked more like rot. His face was bruised along the jaw, a dark mark blooming where someone had struck him. His hair was damp, his beard unkempt, but his posture remained straight, stubborn as a spear planted in frozen ground. He looked up as Cersei approached. His eyes were steady. There was hatred in them, yes, but also a kind of weary sorrow, as if he mourned the world even as it betrayed him. Cersei stopped just out of his reach, the bars between them like a line drawn in iron. "Lord Stark," she said. Ned's voice was rough. "Queen. Regent," she corrected, and tasted the word again. "Regent. Temporary. A bridge." Ned's eyes flickered. "How long do you plan to wear the crown, Cersei? Until your son kills you out of boredom." The insult landed, and for a moment heat flared in her. Then she cooled it as father would have done. Emotion was a luxury. She could not afford it. "You will speak carefully," she said. "Your daughter's life depends on it." Ned's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. "You keep her as hostage." "I keep her alive," Cersei replied. "There is a difference." Ned's gaze sharpened. "And Arya?" Cersei's mouth tightened. "The younger one is missing." Ned's shoulders went tense, the first crack in his control. If you harm her... If she is harmed, Cersei interrupted, it will be because she ran like a wild thing into a city that eats wild things. Not because I ordered it. She leaned slightly closer. But do not mistake me, Lord Stark. If I find her, she will be brought back. For her safety. Ned's bitter laugh echoed weakly off stone. Safety. Cersei watched him. She had expected pleading, bargaining, rage. Instead, she saw a man who had accepted his own ruin and was now only trying to shield what remained of his family. It was almost admirable. Confess, Cersei said. Ned's eyes narrowed. Confess to what? To treason, Cersei said softly. Say you plotted against Joffrey. Say you lied. Say you sought to steal the throne. Do it publicly, and I will allow you to take the Black. The Night's Watch will have you. The North will have your name still breathing, if not your presence. Ned stared at her, disbelief and suspicion warring. You would let me live? Cersei's voice hardened. I would let you be useful. Ned's mouth tightened. And if I refuse? Cersei's eyes glittered. Then my son will do what boys do when they are given power and told. They are gods. He will prove himself. She did not have to say the word head. The cell's damp silence filled it in. Ned's gaze dropped for a heartbeat, to the straw, to his chained hands, to the filth. Then he lifted his eyes again. You think this will hold, he said quietly. You think fear will bind the realm. It won't. Cersei's smile was cold. Fear binds better than love. Ned's voice was low, steady. Your father would have known that fear alone breeds knives. And your father is dead. The words struck harder than any blow. Cersei felt her breath catch before she forced it out. Yes, she said softly. He is. Ned watched her, and for a heartbeat there was something like understanding in his eyes. Understanding of the hole left behind when a pillar fell, of the way roofs collapsed when no one expected them to. Then his face hardened again. You are not him, he said, and without him you will not win. Cersei leaned closer to the bars, her voice a whisper sharp enough to cut. I do not need to be him, she said. I only need to be what the realm fears. She straightened and turned away, her cloak brushing damp stone. At the steps she paused, not looking back. Think of your daughters, she said, and climbed out of the darkness, leaving Ned Stark with the smell of rot and the weight of impossible choices. Joffrey liked fear the way other boys liked sweets. He savored it, rolled it around in his mouth, wanted more of it even when it made him sick. Cersei watched him from the side of the throne as Sansa Stark was brought in. The girl's hair had been brushed until it shone, her dress carefully chosen, soft, innocent, something a court might pity. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she trembled like a leaf. Joffrey leaned forward, his smile bright and sharp. Sansa, he said, voice dripping false warmth. You've been crying. Sansa's voice shook. Your Grace. Joffrey's fingers tapped the armrest. Why do you cry? Your father is a traitor. Traitors deserve punishment. Sansa's eyes flicked to Cersei, pleading. Cersei held her gaze for half a heartbeat, then looked away. Mercy was a dangerous habit. My father is... Sansa began, then swallowed, her throat working as if forcing the words down. My father is loyal. Joffrey laughed, delighted. Loyal? He glanced at the court as if sharing a joke. Mother, did you hear that? She thinks her father is loyal. Cersei's face remained calm. Sansa is young, she said. Grief makes the young say foolish things. Joffrey's eyes sparkled. Then let's teach her. Ser Island Payne stood like death itself near the steps, his great sword resting in his hands. The knight's blank face made him seem less a man than a tool, perfect for Joffrey's games. Sansa, Joffrey said brightly, I want you to look at the walls. Sansa's breath hitched. Your Grace. Joffrey pointed with the casual cruelty of a child directing a dog. Go on. Look. Sansa turned, slowly, and the court's murmur thickened. Above the throne room doors, spiked heads stared sightlessly. Thieves, traitors, men who had dared. Their faces were swollen, their eyes pecked by crows, their mouths open as if still trying to speak. Sansa's knees buckled. She would have fallen if a guard had not caught her elbow. Joffrey's smile widened. "Soon, your father's head will join them," he said, almost gleeful. "Won't that be lovely? Then you can look up every day and remember your place." Sansa made a small sound, like something breaking. Cersei felt a surge of anger, hot, sudden, dangerous, not because she pitied Sansa, but because Joffrey was careless, because he made cruelty into spectacle. Tywin would have understood. Cruelty was most effective when it was quiet, when it made men whisper to each other in fear, not rally in outrage. Tywin was dead, and his lessons lay in Cersei's memory like knives she could still wield. "Joffrey," she said sharply, letting steel enter her voice. "Enough." Joffrey turned on her, eyes flashing. "Why? She should know. She will know what we want her to know," Cersei said, her tone calm again, controlled. "Not what pleases you in the moment." Joffrey's mouth twisted. For a heartbeat he looked like Robert, stubborn, petulant, angry at being denied. Then he leaned back, a sulking king. "Fine," he snapped. "Take her away." "Imbo." Red. Sansa was led out, her face pale, her gaze hollow. As she passed Cersei, her eyes begged again. "Please, please, please." Cersei did not answer. She could not afford to. When the doors closed, the throne room's air felt slightly less tense, as if everyone had been holding breath and now dared to inhale. Joffrey swung his legs like a boy, not a king. "When will Stark confess?" he demanded. "When he sees reason," Cersei said. Joffrey scoffed. "If he won't confess, I'll just kill him." Cersei's hand tightened on the throne's armrest. "You will not," she said, voice low enough that only he could hear. "Not without my word." Joffrey's eyes narrowed. "You forget who is king." Cersei leaned closer, her smile thin and dangerous. "And you forget who taught you the word king," she whispered. "You sit there because I placed you there. Do not bite the hand that holds you up." Joffrey stared at her, startled by the sudden fierceness. Then his lips curled into a sulky pout. "Grandfather would have let me." Cersei's throat tightened. "Grandfather is dead," she said, and the words made the room tilt slightly, as if the floor had shifted beneath her. Joffrey shrugged, careless. "Then you'll have to do." Cersei straightened, her face smooth again. She looked out over the court, over lords who watched and calculated, over ladies who whispered, over guards who tightened grips on spears. She could feel the realm watching her through them, waiting to see if she would crack. Cersei Lannister did not crack, but in the quiet behind her ribs, she felt the first sharp edge of loneliness, and it cut deeper than she expected. Night wrapped King's Landing in smoke and distant firelight. From the battlements, the city looked like a living thing, thousands of little lights like eyes, blinking and shifting. Beyond, Blackwater Bay lay dark and gleaming, the moon's reflection broken by ripples. Cersei stood with her hands on the stone, feeling the cold seep into her palms. The wind tugged at her hair, pulled at her cloak, as if trying to strip her down to something more honest than a queen. Jaime stood beside her, white cloak fluttering, his face turned toward the city but his attention on her. He had always been like that, watching her even when he pretended to watch the world. "They'll come," he said quietly. Cersei's gaze stayed on the city. "Who?" "Everyone," Jaime replied. "Stannis, Renly, the North, the Riverlands. Men who think they can take what father used to hold back." Cersei flinched at the mention, though she did not let it show. "Father." The word was a bruise you pressed with your tongue, testing pain. "They will learn," she said. Jaime's voice was gentle. "Will they?" Cersei turned her head slightly. "Do you doubt me?" Jaime hesitated, just a heartbeat. The hesitation was the wound. "I know you," he said. "You're strong. But father." "Father is dead," Cersei snapped, and the wind stole some of the sharpness, scattering it into the night. She forced herself to breathe. Do not speak as if he were a god. Jaime's eyes held hers. He wasn't a god, he said. He was a wall. Cersei looked away again, out over the city. A wall, yes. Tywin had been the wall that kept the realm's hungers and hatreds from tearing through her. He had been the shadow behind her threats. He had been the certainty men feared. Now she was the wall, and she could feel cracks already forming where she had not known she was thin. Below, a shout rose from the streets. A drunken quarrel, a fight, a reminder that the city's belly was never full and never satisfied. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere, a man laughed too loudly. Somewhere, a knife slid into flesh and a corpse fell into the gutter. This was what she ruled. Not a throne, but a hungry swarm. A raven flew past, a dark shape cutting through moonlight, heading out toward the sea, toward distant castles, toward men who would read letters by torchlight and decide whether to kneel or burn. Cersei watched it vanish into darkness. Tomorrow, she said softly, we send Ned Stark to the Great September. He will confess. He will take the black. The North will swallow it because they will want him alive. Jaime's voice was low. And if he won't? Cersei's fingers tightened on the stone. He will, she said, and forced certainty into the words like iron into a mold. He has daughters. Jaime studied her profile in the cold night. And if Joffrey decides? Cersei's jaw clenched. Then I will stop him. Jaime's mouth twitched, not amused. You can't stop him forever. Cersei felt the truth of that like a knife slid between ribs. A boy king, a cruel boy king. A boy king who would grow into a man who might hate his mother for holding him back. A boy king who might need a war to prove himself. She turned to Jaime, letting the wind whip her hair across her cheek. You promised me, she said quietly. Jaime's eyes softened. I'm here, he repeated. Cersei stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth against the cold. For a moment she let herself rest in the knowledge of him. The only thing in the world that had ever felt like it belonged to her completely. Then she looked past him, past the battlements, past the city, into the darkness where the realm waited. Father thought the world could be ruled like a ledger, she murmured. Debt paid in blood, loyalty purchased in fear, order enforced with steel. Jaime said nothing. Cersei's voice hardened again. He was right, she said, but he left me the bill. She turned back to the city, to the flickering lights, to the smoke and salt air. Below, King's Landing slept uneasily, dreaming of kings and hunger. And above it, Cersei Lannister stood on the battlements like a statue of gold and green, the wind at her back, the realm before her. Ready to rule without the lion who had once ruled for her, ready to learn what it cost to hold power when no one else could hold it for you. The city woke like a sore animal, slow and resentful, its breath a drifting fog that clung to rooftops and chimneys. Dawn in King's Landing was never clean, carried yesterday's ash, yesterday's sweat, yesterday's hunger. The red keep sat above it all like a crowned skull, bright stone gilded by weak sunlight, pretending it was separate from the rot below. Cersei stood over the brazier and watched the parchment curl. The black wax seal softened first, the lion stamp losing its crisp edges as if the beast itself were melting. Then the ink bled, the lines of Tywin's death collapsing into smoke. She held it steady until the fire ate the last readable word. When she released it, the fragments fell into the coals like shed skin. Jaime's voice came from behind her, low and controlled. Burning it doesn't change it. It changes who can use it against me, she said, and kept her eyes on the flame until she could trust her face again. Smoke rose and stung her nostrils, a harsh reminder that all things, paper, pride, promises, could be reduced to nothing with enough heat. Varys hovered near the window, hands folded, the dawn light turning his silk pale as milk. He had the air of a man watching a tide and deciding where best to build his house. A wise precaution, he murmured. Secrets are lighter when they are smoke. Secrets, Cersei repeated, tasting the word like spoiled fruit. You collect them like children collect pretty stones. Children collect stones because they think they might be treasure, Varys said gently. Adults collect them because they know they are. Cersei turned. Jaime's green eyes were sharp, his jaw tight. He hated this, the quiet plotting, the waiting, the words that meant one thing on the surface and another beneath. Jaime preferred steel. Steel did not pretend. Cersei did not have the luxury of preferring anything. The city must not know, she said. Not yet. Varys's smile softened into something that almost looked sympathetic. The city already suspects. When a great lion dies, even if you cover the body with gold, the smell still finds its way through. Cersei's fingers curled, nails pressing crescents into her palm. Then you will find the tongues that carry it and cut them out. Jaime's mouth tightened. Cersei, she ignored him. I want the taverns watched, she continued. The markets, the wharves. I want every whisper reported. Varys inclined his head as if she had asked for a song. As you wish. Cersei's eyes stayed on the brazier. The last scraps of the parchment were black flakes now, lifting and collapsing. Father's death reduced to ash. Felt obscene. Where is Joffrey? She asked, forcing her mind onto the next necessity. Already dressed, Jaime said. Already demanding his crown. He stopped himself, as if the truth in his mouth was too bitter to swallow. He's pleased. Cersei's throat tightened. Pleased that Robert was dead. Pleased that the throne was his. Pleased that no one see. Uld tell him no. Not even the ghost of a grandfather he had never feared properly. She moved to the table where a map lay spread, the realm inked into neat shapes that hid how vast it truly was. Ravens waited in cages beyond the wall, black wings shifting, impatient for orders. Send to Kevan, she said. Tell him the crown calls him to King's Landing. Tell him. She paused, and the pause held all the weight of what she could not say in a raven scroll. Tell him I need you because the world is coming for my throat. Tell him I am standing where father stood and the stone beneath my feet is cracking. Tell him it is urgent, she finished, and hated the weakness of the word. Jaime's gaze flicked to her. Kevan will come. And the Westerlands? She asked. They will follow Casterly Rock, Jaime said carefully. Not King's Landing. Cersei's smile was thin. Then we will make Casterly Rock follow King's Landing. Varys's eyes glinted. A delicate task, without Lord Tywin's influence. Cersei's gaze snapped to him. My influence will be enough. Varys bowed slightly, but his silence was not agreement. It was merely patience. Cersei reached for a quill and began dictating letters, commands dressed as condolences, requests dressed as royal decrees. Each seal pressed into wax felt like another stone placed on a wall she was building with her bare hands. Outside, the city's bells began to toll for Robert Baratheon. Inside, Cersei Lannister wrote as if she could nail the realm into place with ink. The black cells had no dawn. They had only damp and darkness, and the slow drip of water like a clock that counted nothing but despair. Ned Stark's hands were chained, but it was not the iron that weighed on him. It was the knowledge that every breath he took was bought with his daughter's fear. When Varys arrived, the guards did not announce him. He appeared like a thought you wished you had not had. Soft footsteps, soft voice, a scent of powder and clean linen that did not belong in a place like this. Ned looked up, eyes bloodshot, and found the spider smiling at him through the bars. My lord, Varys said, settling himself on a low stool as if visiting a sick friend. You look weary. Ned's voice scraped out rough. You come to gloat? Varys's smile barely shifted. I come because you are at a crossroads, and the wrong step will kill more than you. Ned's gaze sharpened. My daughters. Your daughters, Varys agreed softly. One is safe for now. One is missing. The city is large, and it is not kind to lost children. Ned's stomach twisted. Arya's fierce little face flashed in his mind, her stubborn chin, her hands always reaching for a sword she did not have. Find her, he said, the words a command even here, even chained. If you have any decency. Decency? Varys murmured as if tasting it. A fine word. Rare in this place. Ned leaned forward as far as his chains allowed. Why are you here? Varys's eyes softened, and for a moment his careful mask slipped enough to show something else beneath. Weariness, perhaps, or something like regret. Because the realm bleeds, he said quietly, and because when men like you die, my lord, the bleeding becomes harder to stop. Ned laughed once, bitter. You helped them seize me. I helped prevent a slaughter, Varys corrected gently. Had Lord Renly taken your daughters in the night, had swords been drawn in the halls, the Red Keep would have run redder than you can imagine. And then the realm would truly have begun to burn. Ned's jaw tightened. It will burn anyway, unless you give it a different story, Varys said, leaning closer. The torchlight caught his eyes, making them gleam like wet stones. Confess. Ned went still. Confess to treason I did not commit. Confess to save what remains, Varys whispered. You are an honorable man, Lord Stark. Honor is a beautiful thing, but it is not a shield for children. Ned's hands clenched despite the chains. He could feel the iron bite his wrists. They want me to take the black. Yes, Varys said, and his voice was almost kind. The Queen Regent thinks it is tidy. A traitor humiliated, the king satisfied, the North allowed to swallow the insult because you still live. You will be a hostage in black wool, but you will breathe. Ned's eyes closed for a moment. The wall rose in his mind. Ice and duty, cold purity. He had sent men there. He had never imagined he might go himself. And if I refuse? He asked, though he already knew. Varys's smile thinned. Then the king will do what boys do when they are frightened. He will strike. Ned opened his eyes. Joffrey is cruel. Cruel, Varys agreed, and also easily steered when the right hand holds the reins. But reins slip. His gaze flicked, ever so slightly, as if toward a shadow Ned could not see. And the Queen Regent is alone now, more than she wishes the realm to know. Ned stared at him. Alone now. The words echoed oddly. What do you mean? Varys's expression smoothed. Only that power shifts. It always does. Ned's thoughts churned. If something had happened, if Tywin Lannister had fallen, if the lion's shadow had receded, then perhaps the realm had a chance. Yet that chance would not save his daughters if he died tomorrow. I will not beg, Ned said hoarsely. You will not beg, Varys agreed. You will speak the words they require with your head high, and you will live long enough to regret it. That is the bargain. Ned's throat tightened. He saw Sansa's face, pale and pleading. He saw Arya running, wild and desperate. He saw Cat's eyes in his memory, fierce with love and grief. He saw Robb, young and stubborn, already carrying a sword too heavy for him. Honor demanded one thing. Love demanded another. Ned's voice broke on the edge of restraint. If I confess, they will spare my daughters? Varys's gaze held his. I can promise you this, my lord. If you refuse, they will certainly not. Ned's breath shuddered. He bowed his head, not in prayer, but in surrender to the only choice left. Find Arya, he whispered. Find her and keep her hidden. Varys inclined his head. I will do what I can. He rose, smoothing his robes as if leaving a pleasant parlor rather than a pit. At the door he paused, looking back through the bars. Sometimes, he said softly, the realm needs a man to live, even if he must live with shame. Ned Stark closed his eyes and felt shame settle on his shoulders like snow. The great September of Baelor gleamed like a promise in the midday sun. Its marble steps washed pale, its domes shining, its doors thrown open as if the gods themselves were eager to witness the kingdom's justice. The crowd was thick enough to stink. Sweat, cheap ale, unwashed bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. They had come for a show. They always did. The city devoured spectacle like bread. Cersei stood beside Joffrey on the platform, her spine straight, her face composed. She wore black trimmed with gold. Mourning made regal. The air tasted of incense and heat. Somewhere below, Sansa Stark stood with hands clasped so tightly her knuckles shone white, lips moving soundlessly as if praying harder could bend fate. Ned Stark was brought out in chains. He walked slowly, head high despite the iron biting his wrists. His hair was damp with sweat, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes were clear. He looked out over the crowd and did not flinch. For a heartbeat, Cersei understood why men followed him. He carried something that made even a cage look like a choice. The High Septon raised a crystal seven-pointed star, sunlight splintering through it into cold rainbows. "Let the gods witness truth," he intoned, voice wavering with age and self-importance. "Let the realm be cleansed of treason." Joffrey leaned forward, eyes bright. He loved this. He loved being watched. Cersei leaned slightly toward him, her voice a soft thread. "Remember," she whispered, "what we agreed. He confesses. He takes the black. The North calms. The realm holds." Joffrey's lips twitched. "If he amuses me," he murmured back. Cersei's stomach tightened. "He will," she said. Below, Ned was forced to his knees. The crowd surged, some jeering, some watching in uneasy silence. The sound of it rose like a tide. Ned's voice carried when he spoke. He did not shout. He did not need to. The weight in his words did the work. "I betrayed my king," he said, and each syllable tasted like ash to him. "I plotted to steal his rightful throne. I confess my treason." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Satisfaction, surprise, hunger. Sansa made a small choking sound. Relief and grief tangled together. Cersei felt her chest loosen slightly, as if a hand had eased off her throat. It was done. The story would be swallowed. The realm would accept what it needed to accept, because men would always choose the tale that let them sleep. Ned continued, voice steady despite the chains. "I beg mercy of his grace, King Joffrey Baratheon. I ask to live, so I may take the black and spend my remaining days in service to the Night's Watch." The High Septon nodded as if pleased. The gods had been fed their words. Cersei turned her gaze to Joffrey, ready to guide him into the correct answer like a child reciting a prayer. And then she saw it, the tiny shift in his eyes, the flicker of something sharp and excited, as if a new thought had been dropped into him like a coin into a beggar's cup. Someone leaned, close to Joffrey's other side, Peter Baelish, half a step behind, his mouth moving near the king's ear. Cersei could not hear the words over the crowd, but she saw their effect like poison spreading. Joffrey's smile widened. Cersei's blood turned cold. Joffrey stood, and the crowd hushed, eager. "My mother," he said loudly, turning his head with a theatrical innocence, "says I should be merciful." Cersei's mouth tightened. She kept her face smooth. "Mercy is strength," she said, projecting calm. Joffrey's eyes glittered. "Yes," he said, "mercy is strength, and so is justice." The crowd leaned in. Cersei's fingers curled in her sleeves. "Joffrey," she murmured, voice low, warning. He ignored her with the ease of a boy ignoring a nurse. "My lord," Joffrey called down to Ned, voice ringing bright. "You confessed. How noble. How convenient. But I am the king, and I decide what the realm deserves." Cersei felt the moment teeter, felt it balanced on the edge of a blade. "Ser Island Pain," Joffrey said, and the name hit the air like a stone. A ripple ran through the crowd. Joy, shock, sudden hunger. Sansa's breath caught. Her eyes widened, terrified, and her gaze snapped to Cersei like a drowning girl reaching for a hand. Cersei stepped forward, unable to stop herself. "No," she hissed, and the word was lost in the crowd's rising roar. Joffrey turned his head slightly, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "My grandfather is dead," he said softly enough that only she could hear, and the words stabbed deeper than any blade. "No one will call me weak." Cersei's throat tightened. Tywin's death, spoken aloud here now. The rumor had become truth on the king's tongue. She reached for Joffrey's arm. "You will not do this." Joffrey jerked away as if her touch burned. Then he lifted his chin and spoke to the realm. "Bring me his head." The crowd erupted. And Cersei Lannister stood beside her son as the kingdom slipped out of her hands in a single gleeful command. Everything after Joffrey's words moved too quickly, as if the world had grown impatient. Ned Stark was hauled forward, forced down, his knees grinding on sun-warmed marble. He did not thrash. He did not beg. He lifted his head and looked out over the crowd, over the city, over a world that had decided it would rather be entertained than just. Cersei surged forward, rage and panic flaring so hot she nearly lost herself to it. "Stop!" she began, but the roar swallowed her voice. Jaime caught her arm. His grip was iron beneath white cloth. "Cersei," he said sharply, and in that single word was the brutal truth. "You cannot wrestle a king in front of the realm and expect the realm to remain yours." She twisted against him like a trapped cat, eyes fixed on Joffrey. Joffrey was smiling. Ser Island Payne stepped forward, silent as ever, the great sword heavy in his hands. Sunlight flashed along the blade's edge. The High Septon's crystal star trembled in his grip. Ned's eyes lifted, and for a moment they met Cersei's across the chaos. There was no plea in them, only a cold, grim understanding, as if he wanted her to see what she had unleashed, as if he wanted her to carry it. Sansa screamed. The sound was raw enough to tear skin. She lurched forward, but guards held her, and her small hands clawed at air that offered nothing. Tears streamed down her face, turning dust into tracks on her cheeks. Somewhere in the crowd, a boy's voice shouted for blood. Somewhere else, a woman sobbed. The city was a mouth open wide, ready to swallow. Cersei's heart hammered so hard she felt it in her teeth. This was wrong. This was not the plan. This was not how Father would have done it. Father would have kept Ned alive until the North bent. Father would have used him like a leash, but Father was gone, and she was ruling a boy who did not understand leashes, only knives. Island Payne lifted the sword. Ned Stark drew a breath and spoke, not loud, but clear enough that the front of the crowd heard. "My son," he said, and the words were for Robb, for Bran, for all of them. An invisible thread stretched northward.
"I'm sorry."
Then the blade fell. It was swift. It was clean enough to be obscene. Blood spattered hot against pale stone, bright as spilled wine. The crowd's roar surged again, triumphant and horrified at once. Sansa crumpled like cloth, her scream collapsing into a strangled sound. The guards caught her before she hit the marble, but her eyes had gone wide and empty, as if her mind had fled her body to escape what her body had seen. Cersei went still. For a heartbeat, she could not breathe. The world tilted. The sound became distant. She saw only the absence where Ned Stark's head had been. Joffrey leaned forward, delighted. "There," he said brightly, voice carrying.
"So dies a traitor."
Cersei's vision sharpened like a blade being honed. She looked at her son. Not her child, not her blood, but her king, and something in her changed shape. Love did not vanish. It tightened. It became dangerous. At the edge of the crowd, half hidden by taller bodies, Arya Stark stared up at the steps, her face twisted with horror so fierce it looked like hatred. Her hair was tucked under a filthy cap, her cheeks smeared with dirt. A small, thin creature in a city of wolves. A rough hand clamped onto her shoulder. Yoren, the Night's Watch recruiter, his black cloak lost amid the mob. He snarled something at her that she did not seem to hear. He dragged her backward, away, his grip firm, his eyes scanning for gold cloaks. Arya fought like a wildcat, silent and furious. Her gaze never left the steps until the crowd swallowed the view. Cersei did not see Arya. She saw only the consequences unfurling in her mind like a banner. The North's rage, Robb Stark's sword, the Riverlands burning, lords choosing sides, the realm slipping toward war. Jaime's grip tightened on her arm. "We must go," he said, voice hard. Cersei's eyes remained locked on Joffrey, as if she could carve the moment into him and make him feel it. Joffrey only smiled wider, basking in the crowd's roar. As they turned away, the September bells began to toll again. Not for Robert now, not for a king, but for a man whose death would crack the realm open like an egg. And Cersei Lannister walked back toward the Red Keep with her face composed and her hands trembling inside her sleeves. By nightfall, the city had turned sour. It began with shouting in the markets, men arguing over the price of bread, women cursing the crown, children crying as their mothers pulled them away from trouble. It spread like sickness. By dusk, Flea Bottom was boiling, the narrow streets thick with bodies, torches, and anger. The small folk did not riot for Ned Stark. Most of them had never seen him before he knelt on the September steps. They rioted because the city's hunger was constant, and today the crown had fed it blood instead of bread. Blood made men bold. It made them believe they could take more. Cersei watched from behind shuttered windows as smoke rose, thin at first, then thicker. The distant roar of a crowd drifted up through the Red Keep's courtyards, muffled but insistent, like waves beating against cliffs. Gold cloaks moved through the streets in clusters, their brass catching torchlight. She could imagine Janos Slint's men cracking skulls with batons, dragging rioters into alleys, leaving bodies in gutters as warnings. She had ordered it. Order must be enforced. A city that learned it could scream at its rulers would scream again. Jaime stood beside her, hand resting on his sword as if steel could cut through smoke and noise. "They're getting close," he said. Cersei's gaze remained on the distant fires. "Let them," she replied. "Let them exhaust themselves." "And if they don't?" Jaime asked. Cersei turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. "Then we remind them what the crown is." She moved away from the window and crossed to the table where ravens waited in cages, black eyes shining. Several scrolls lay unopened, seals pressed into wax. Messages were arriving like arrows. She broke the first seal. Winterfell. The handwriting was Maester Luwin's, careful and horrified. Words blurred into a single meaning. The North had risen. Robb Stark had called his banners. The second scroll bore the flayed man of Bolton. Colder ink, colder words. Men were gathering, oaths being sworn, swords being sharpened. The third was from Riverrun. Catelyn Stark had returned, and the River Lords were stirring like hornets. Cersei's fingers tightened until the parchment crumpled slightly. Each raven was a drumbeat. A fourth scroll bore a lion seal from the west. Her breath caught before she could stop it. She broke it open with a nail and read quickly. The news she had tried to keep hidden had reached the Rock. Tywin Lannister was dead. The letter was from Kevan, brief and blunt, grief contained in rigid lines. He wrote of a funeral being prepared in Casterly Rock's golden halls. He wrote of bannermen gathering. He wrote of how the Westerlands waited for direction, and how direction, now, must come from the crown, not from a dead lord. Cersei stared at the words until they blurred. Father's death was no longer a secret she could wield. It was a fact the realm would use against her. Jaime's voice was quieter when he spoke again. "They know." "Yes," Cersei said, and her voice was flat. "Now they know." She imagined the letters already spreading. Lords writing to each other, merchants whispering in taverns, enemies smiling into their cups. The old lion's shadow was gone. The lioness stood exposed. A crash sounded from somewhere below. Perhaps a door thrown open, perhaps something smashed in anger. Another roar rose from the city, distant but swelling. Cersei rolled the parchments up with deliberate calm. "Send ravens," she said, "to every lord who ever feasted at the Red Keep. Tell them the king's peace is threatened by traitors and rebels. Tell them to come. Tell them I am not weak," she thought, but did not speak it aloud. Weakness was a word that grew teeth if you fed it. Jaime studied her. "And Joffrey." Cersei's jaw clenched. "Joffrey will learn," she said, "one way or another." She moved toward the door, her skirts whispering over stone. Outside, the Red Keep's halls were filled with hurried footsteps and murmured orders. The castle was bracing itself, tightening like a fist. Down in the city, fires flickered and spread. And in the north, men were already saddling horses, the memory of a severed head burning in their minds like a brand. Joffrey's chambers smelled of wine and sweat and the faint metallic tang of blood that clung to a boy who had watched a man die and found it thrilling. A goblet lay shattered on the floor, red wine seeping into the rug like a wound. Servants hovered at the edges, terrified to move until someone gave permission to breathe. Cersei swept in without waiting to be announced. Joffrey lounged on a cushioned chair, one leg swung over the armrest like a street boy. His cheeks were flushed, eyes bright with leftover excitement. He looked up at her and smiled as if greeting a lover, not a mother. "Mother," he said, voice sweetly mocking. "Did you enjoy my justice?" Cersei's hand flashed out before she could decide not to. The slap cracked through the room like a whip. Joffrey's head snapped sideways. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. The Hound, Sandor Clegane, stood near the door, his scarred face unreadable. His eyes flicked from Cersei to Joffrey, then away again. A dog watching wolves. Joffrey's hand rose slowly to his cheek. His eyes widened, not with pain, but with astonishment that anyone had dared. Then his mouth twisted into something ugly. "You struck me." Cersei's voice was low, shaking only in the places she refused to show. "You will not do that again," she said. "Do you understand what you've done?" Joffrey's lips curled. "I've shown them who is king." "You've shown them you are a fool," Cersei hissed. "You've given the North a martyr. You've given your uncles a reason. You've given every hungry lord in the realm permission to raise a banner and call himself savior." Joffrey's face reddened. "They fear me," he spat. "They cheered. They cheered because you fed them blood," Cersei said, stepping closer. "Small folk cheer for anything that distracts them from hunger. They will cheer for your death just as quickly if someone else offers them bread." Joffrey's eyes glittered. "You sound like grandfather." The word hit Cersei like a fist. "Grandfather, Tywin, dead." Joffrey's eyes glittered. "And now he's gone," he said, almost gleeful again. "So you'll have to stop pretending I'm a child." Cersei's jaw tightened. "You are a child. I am the king," Joffrey snapped, voice rising. "I can do as I like." Cersei leaned in, her smile thin as wire. "You can do as you like until you destroy everything that holds you up," she whispered. "Do you think a crown is magic? Do you think sitting on a chair of swords makes men obey? Men obey because they fear what happens if they don't. And fear must be managed." Joffrey's nostrils flared. "Manage it, then." Cersei stared at him, seeing Robert's stubborn cruelty in the tilt of his chin, seeing her own pride twisted into something harsher. She felt, suddenly, the truth settle like lead. Joffrey would not be guided. He would be endured, or replaced by a gentler brother who could be steered. A thought she had never allowed herself to name rose quietly in her mind, cold as a knife. Tommen. He straightened, smoothing her gown as if smoothing her thoughts into place. "From now on," she said, voice calm again, "you will listen when I speak. You will not make public decisions without me. You will not throw tantrums in front of lords." Joffrey laughed, short and sharp. "Or what? You'll slap me again?" Cersei's eyes did not blink. "Or you will discover that kings who do not listen do not remain kings for long." For a moment, something like fear flickered in Joffrey's gaze, quick, hidden beneath pride. Then it vanished beneath anger. "Get out," he snarled. "Get out of my chambers." Cersei held his gaze for a long heartbeat, then turned and walked toward the door, leaving him standing amid broken glass and spilled wine. As she passed Sandor Clegane, she paused just long enough to let her voice brush his ear. "Watch him," she murmured. "And if he grows reckless, you tell me." Sandor's scarred mouth twitched, not quite a smile. He said. Cersei left the chamber with her face smooth and her heart pounding. Behind her, Joffrey's furious shout shattered another goblet, and the servants flinched like beaten dogs. Cersei walked through the Red Keep's corridors thinking of walls and cracks, of crowns and knives, of a younger son with soft hands and frightened eyes. and of how a mother might someday choose the realm over the child she had raised into a monster. Kevan Lannister did not arrive with Tywin's thunder. There were no extravagant banners unfurled dramatically in the courtyard, no deliberate show of fear. Kevan came like a man answering a summons because duty required it, not because the realm demanded a spectacle. Yet when he entered the throne room, travel-stained and unsmiling, the court's whispers changed. They sharpened. Men looked at him as if searching for Tywin's ghost in his shoulders. Kevan knelt at the foot of the dais, head bowed, hands clasped. Behind him stood a small knot of Westerland guards, hard-faced men with lion badges dull beneath road dust. "Your Grace," Kevan said, voice steady. His gaze lifted to Cersei, and grief sat behind his eyes like a dark stone. "My condolences, for the king, and for my brother." The words landed heavily in the chamber. "My brother." Spoken aloud, Tywin's death became real in a way it had not been in Cersei's private letters and ash. Joffrey shifted on the throne, bored already. "Yes, yes," he said, waving a hand. "It's sad. Now stand up." Kevan rose smoothly, eyes flicking to Joffrey with the careful neutrality of a man who had served under Tywin long enough to hide his true thoughts behind stone. Cersei studied him, searching for judgment, for accusation, for any hint that he blamed her for not being Casterly Rock itself. "Uncle Kevan," Cersei said, voice controlled. "You came quickly." "I rode quickly," Kevan replied. His gaze held hers for a heartbeat longer than courtesy required. "Because the realm moves quickly when it smells blood." Cersei's fingers tightened on the armrest. "Then you understand why I need you." Kevan's eyes drifted briefly to Joffrey, then back. "I understand why the crown needs steady hands." Joffrey scoffed. "The crown has me." Kevan bowed his head slightly. "Of course, Your Grace." Cersei felt the faintest sting. Kevan's restraint was a kind of insult. Tywin had never bowed to anyone's foolishness. Kevan did because Kevan knew the value of swallowing pride. After the court was dismissed, after Joffrey stomped away with his guards and his petulance, Cersei drew Kevan into a private chamber. Jaime lingered near the door like a silent warning, white cloak bright against stone. Kevan looked around the room as if measuring it. "You have too many listeners," he said bluntly. Cersei's mouth tightened. "I have what I need." Kevan's eyes hardened slightly. "You have Varys and Baelish," he said. "That is not need. That is inviting snakes into your bed and hoping they bite someone else." Cersei's temper flared. "Careful," she said. "You forget who sits the throne." Kevan's gaze did not flinch. "I do not forget," he said quietly. "I remember who used to stand behind the throne, and I know the difference." The words were not cruel, merely true, and truth was sometimes the sharpest blade. Cersei's fingers curled. "You came to lecture me?" "I came to keep our house alive," Kevan said. His voice tightened slightly. "Grief pressing through duty. Tywin is dead. The North is rising. Stannis will claim the crown. Renly will claim the crown. The Riverlands will burn. And your son." He stopped, choosing his words like a man choosing where to step on ice. "Your son is not tempered." Cersei's jaw clenched. "He is king." "He is a boy," Kevan replied, and there was steel beneath the calm. "A boy who thinks fear is the same as respect." Cersei's eyes flashed. "And what would you have me do? Put him aside?" Kevan's gaze held hers. For a heartbeat, silence answered. Then he looked away, as if refusing to step into that abyss. "I would have you place competent men where they can do the most good," he said. "I would have you secure allies with marriages and gold, not blood. I would have you stop making enemies you cannot afford." Cersei's smile was thin. "And I suppose you have a list of competent men." Kevan's eyes flicked toward Jaime briefly, then away. "Tyrion," he said. The name hit Cersei like a slap. "He is a prisoner in the Vale," she snapped. "He is alive," Kevan said. "If he lives, and if he returns. He is clever. He sees through lies. He can be cruel when needed and calm when it matters." "Father." He stopped, swallowed, and corrected himself with effort. Tywin trusted him more than you think, even if he despised him. Cersei's mouth twisted. Tywin despised him because he murdered our mother. Kevan's gaze was steady. Tywin despised him because Tyrion reminded him that the world does not obey wishes. Cersei's hand tightened on the table edge. Jaime's eyes flicked toward her, warning her not to lose control. Kevan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you want to hold this city," he said, "you will need more than pride. You will need strategy. You will need restraint. You will need a new Tywin," Cersei finished bitterly. Kevan's eyes softened, briefly. "No one replaces Tywin," he said. "But someone must do the work he did." Cersei stared at him, feeling the truth press against her like a cold wall. Father had been a wall. Kevan was offering to be a buttress, not a replacement. "I will consider it," she said, and the words tasted like swallowing gravel. Kevan nodded, satisfied enough to move on. "Then we start with the city," he said. "Food, gates, gold. The gold cloaks must be loyal to us, not to coin." Cersei's eyes narrowed. "Coin is loyalty in King's Landing." Kevan's mouth tightened. "Then we must be the richest." Cersei thought of the crown's debts, of Lannister gold tied up in a west that now mourned its lord. She thought of enemies gathering like crows, and she realized that Kevan had come not as a comfort, but as a reminder. The realm did not care that she was grieving. It would test her anyway. The alchemist's guild hall smelled of vinegar, smoke, and secrets. Cersei had not come here in years. Robert had mocked the pyromancers as relics, old men clinging to old terrors. Tywin had understood them better. Tywin understood that fear was not only made of swords, could be brewed. Now Cersei walked through arched halls lined with shelves of strange powders and jars that gleamed faintly even in shadow. The air felt warmer the deeper she went, as if the building itself sweated. The Wisdomers waited in a chamber lit by candles and the sickly green glow of wildfire contained in thick glass. Their robes were soot-stained, their hands scarred, their eyes bright with the fervor of men who believed they held dragonfire in their palms. They bowed low when Cersei entered, more quickly than they would have bowed to Robert. Queens at least respected fear. "Your Grace," croaked the eldest, his voice thin but proud. "We are honored." Cersei's gaze swept over the jars. The green light painted her fingers, made her skin look almost translucent, as if she were lit from within by the same unnatural flame. "You have it," she said. "We have always had it," the man whispered, almost reverent. "But the crown has not always valued it." Cersei thought of Aerys Targaryen, mad and burning, his caches hidden beneath the city like buried rage. She thought of the smell of smoke in her dreams. She thought of King's Landing as a tinderbox and herself as the hand holding a spark. "I value what keeps me alive," she said. Jaime stood behind her, quiet, his eyes wary. He had been there when Aerys had planned to burn the city. He had killed a king to stop it. The memory sat on him like a shadow no white cloak could erase. The eldest Wisdomer gestured toward the jars with trembling pride. "It burns hotter than any flame," he said. "It clings. It devours. It is beautiful." "Beauty is not what I require," Cersei replied. "How much?" The pyromancer blinked. "As much as you desire, Your Grace. We can produce more." "The spells." "Tell me numbers," Cersei snapped. "Tell me how many jars. How fast. How safely." The man swallowed, and his eyes flicked to Jaime as if the Kingslayer's presence made the air colder. "We can provide 100 jars within the fortnight," he said carefully. "More if given coin and protection." Cersei nodded slowly. "You will have coin," she said, "and you will have protection." She glanced at Jaime. "The Kingsguard will see to that." Jaime's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. Not here. Not with green fire humming in glass. Cersei stepped closer to a jar and watched the wildfire shift, alive and eager, as if it sensed attention. The green light danced across her eyes. For a moment she imagined the city below, streets packed with men who would one day roar for her blood, and she imagined washing them in flame until their voices stopped. It was a tempting thought, a simple thought, too simple. Tywin would have despised simplicity.
Keskiviikko.
Van's words echoed. Allies, not Ash. Cersei forced herself to step back. I want caches placed, she said. Hidden, secure, under the walls, near the gates, near the river. If Stannis comes with ships, I want the bay itself to bite him. The pyromancers bowed eagerly. As you command, your grace. Cersei's gaze remained on the green glow. Felt like holding a monster in a bottle. A monster she might one day need. As they left the Guildhall, Jaime caught her arm, pulling her into a shadowed corridor. His voice was tight. This is madness. Cersei's eyes flashed. This is insurance, she said. The realm is coming, Jaime. If they break the gates, if they flood the city, what then? Do you think honor will stop a sword? Do you think prayers will? Jaime's grip tightened. I killed a king to stop him from doing what you're talking about. Cersei held his gaze, unblinking. And you will kill anyone who tries to burn my children, she said. Even me, if you must. But I will not stand unarmed while the world closes in. Jaime's eyes softened with something like pain. He released her slowly. You're not armed, he said. You're lighting matches in a room full of smoke. Cersei turned away, her face hard again. Then tell the realm not to breathe so close, she said, and walked on. Behind her, the green light faded, but the idea of it remained. Quiet, waiting, hungry. Peter Baelish left King's Landing with a smile on his lips and knives in his pockets. Cersei watched him go with suspicion that tasted like bile, but she had sent him anyway, because she needed what he was good at. Slipping into other people's dreams and convincing them those dreams were his idea. Ravens returned with scraps of information stitched together into uneasy pictures. Renly Baratheon was gathering a host so large it looked like summer made of steel. Lords and bright banners, knights polished like mirrors, laughter and music in a camp that felt more like a tourney than a war. The Tyrells had thrown their weight behind him, and with them came food, gold, and the Reach's endless men. Cersei could see it in her mind. A younger Baratheon wearing a crown of roses, charming and bright, loved by men who did not want to think too hard about legitimacy as long as feasts continued. She could also see the danger. The Reach could starve King's Landing without ever drawing a sword. In a flowered pavilion perfumed with crushed petals, Olenna Tyrell received Littlefinger like a cat receiving a mouse. Amused, curious, ready to bite. He bowed low, all humility and charm. Lady Olenna, he purred, how radiant you look in a war camp. Olenna's eyes gleamed like sharp stones. Radiant? She echoed, voice dry. If I were radiant, Lord Baelish, the men would be using me to light their tents. Margaery Tyrell sat nearby, serene, hands folded, her face calm as water. Ser Loras Tyrell stood like a shining statue, armor gleaming, eyes vigilant. Renly's laughter drifted in from outside, bright and careless. Littlefinger spoke softly, spinning his web. He offered Cersei's condolences. He offered the crown's respect. He offered, finally, what Cersei had instructed him to offer with gritted teeth. Marriage. King Joffrey Baratheon, he said smoothly, requires a queen. A queen who could bring peace. A queen like Lady Margaery Tyrell. Olenna leaned back, studying him. And what does the Queen Regent offer in return for this peace? Littlefinger smiled. A crown, he said, a place beside the Iron Throne, the future of the realm. Olenna clicked her tongue. The future of the realm, she repeated, and the way she said it made it sound like a joke told too many times. The boy king who chops off heads on holy steps. The mother who slaps him in private and smiles in public. The old lion dead in his golden den. Her eyes sharpened. Is that the future you offer me? Littlefinger's smile did not falter. The future is always uncertain, he said, but uncertainty can be managed. Olenna's gaze flicked toward Margaery. My granddaughter is not a tool to be used by frightened lions. Marjorie's expression remained composed, but her eyes watched everything. Littlefinger's mouth, Olenna's hands, Loras's tension. She looked like a woman already practicing how to wear a crown. Ser Loras's voice cut in sharp. We have chosen King Renly. Renly swept into the pavilion then, bright as a song. Ah, he said, grinning. Are we discussing my brother's charming little son? Littlefinger bowed again. Smooth. Your Grace, he said, as if the word cost him nothing. Renly laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. Tell my sister-in-law she can keep her offer, he said lightly, as if dismissing a dinner invitation rather than a desperate plea. The Reach is with me. The Stormlands are with me. The realm wants a king who smiles. Littlefinger's eyes glittered. The realm wants many things, he murmured. Olenna leaned forward, her voice suddenly softer, more dangerous. Tell the Queen Regent, she said, that if she wants peace, she should learn what peace costs. And it costs more than a boy's hand and a mother's pride. Littlefinger bowed, and when he left the pavilion, his smile was still there, but it had sharpened, like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. In King's Landing, when the raven brought the message back, Cersei crushed the parchment in her fist until wax cracked. The roses would not bend. Not yet. The mountains did not care who was king. They stood cold and indifferent as Tyrion Lannister rode down their winding roads with Bronn at his side. Both of them dirty, bruised, and alive by inches. The sky above was clear and cruel, the kind of blue that made a man feel small. Tyrion's hands ached from gripping reins too long. His ribs hurt when he breathed. Yet beneath the pain was something sharper, something almost like laughter pressing at the back of his throat. He had survived the Eyrie. He had survived Catelyn Stark's hatred. He had stood in the sky cells and listened to wind howl through stone like the gods themselves were mocking him. He had won his freedom with a Sellsword sword and a madwoman's pride. And now, on the road, the world had changed. A raven had found them at an inn on the edge of the Vale, black wings flapping, its leg bearing a scroll sealed with lion wax. Tyrion had broken it open with fingers that still trembled from the last fight. Tywin Lannister was dead. Robert Baratheon was dead. Eddard Stark had been executed. Tyrion read the words twice, then laughed so hard it made his ribs scream. Bronn had stared at him as if wondering whether the little lord had finally cracked. Bad news, Bronn had asked, amused. Excellent news, Tyrion had wheezed, wiping his mouth. For someone, not sure who yet. Now, riding, he kept the letter tucked in his glove, feeling its weight as if it were coin. Tywin dead meant the rock was vulnerable. It meant the family's center of gravity had shifted. It meant Cersei was alone with a vicious boy king and a court full of smiling predators. It meant there might be room for Tyrion Lannister to become something other than a joke. Bronn rode easily beside him, chewing on a strip of dried meat. So your father's dead, he said casually. You said. Tyrion's mouth twisted.
I'm complicated.
Bronn snorted. Your sister will be pleased, he said. She always wanted to run things. Tyrion's eyes narrowed. My sister will be terrified, he corrected. Cersei likes power the way a child likes a torch. She loves how bright it is, but she forgets what it does when she drops it. Bronn grinned. And you? Tyrion looked ahead. The road bent south, toward the Riverlands, toward war. In the far distance, the haze of the city could almost be imagined. King's Landing, sprawling and filthy and crowned, like a pig wearing jewels. I, Tyrion said softly, am very good at picking up what other people drop. A raven circled overhead, croaking once, as if laughing too. Tyrion pulled his cloak tighter and urged his horse onward. Each hoofbeat carried him closer to the capital where his sister ruled in her father's absence, where his nephew sat on a throne made of blades, where enemies gathered like storm clouds. Tyrion felt the familiar mix of dread and excitement coil in his gut. King's Landing was a pit of vipers. And Tyrion Lannister, half a man with a full mind, was riding straight back. to it, smiling as if the danger were a feast.